Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese.
And I'm Mike Poteet, and you're listening to episode 53, Oh Christmas Trek. We'll start off with some Star Trek news, and then we'll talk about Star Trek Discovery Season 4, Episode 5, The Examples.
And then we'll get into our audience question right after our main topic, Oh Christmas Trek. We're going to be talking about Christmas Star Trek movies. Star Trek movies as Christmas movies. What makes a Christmas movie? What makes a Star Trek movie? Well, we probably won't get into that, but we're going to have fun, and we hope you enjoy it. Stick around. Well, Mike, I almost laughed in the middle of doing our intro, which wouldn't have been a problem, but because it's not like it would be the first time. But
there's no law against laughter during the intro.
Well, that is true. That is
especially
true.
When we're doing something fun like Star Trek and Christmas together. It's like your Christmas tastes great in my Star Trek. Your Star Trek tastes great in my Christmas. So tis the season,
it works,
right?
It works, yeah. Oh, Christmas Trek. That was Mike's idea, by the way, folks. That was a really good one. I like that very much.
I cannot deny.
Cannot tell.
So send all angry emails to me.
Yeah, all you Tenenbaum fans who are greatly offended. Hi, welcome back.
Well, welcome back to you, sir. It's good to have you back in the center seat this week.
It's good to be here. I am very glad. Thank you to you and David for taking over last week. That was awesome.
Glad we could do that.
Yep, me too. That's what friends are for.
Now there's a blast from the past. I haven't thought about that song in forever. Oh, I'm just going to start calling you Dion. That was a Dionne Warwick number, wasn't it?
I don't even know.
At least she recorded it. I don't know who wrote the thing, but
yeah, I don't know. But there we go.
Maybe that should have been the theme music for Star Trek Enterprise. I don't know.
Maybe so. I don't know. Oh boy. I feel a rabbit hole coming. I'm not sure which direction it goes, but
let's just jump out of that rabbit hole.
It's probably less
Star
directional than the DMA. We'll say that. Yes, Mike. Let's get into Star Trek news. I think you have some.
I do, and as is my wont, my Star Trek news is following the continuing saga of LeVar Burton.
Yes.
And quiz show entertainment.
Yes.
He had his guest host. He had his week as guest host of Jeopardy last July. Mm-hmm. He now is developing his own game show, a version of Trivial Pursuit. And next year, June 1st and 2nd, 2022, LeVar Burton will be hosting the semifinals and finals of the 94th Scripps National Spelling Bee.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's cool.
He said in a release, hosting the Scripps National Spelling Bee will be an honor. Like a lot of folks, I look forward to the competition every year, and I'm excited to be a part of this wonderful tradition that celebrates excellence. So I think another perfect match of project and performer. Of course, the real stars of the spelling bee are the kids,
of course,
who can spell these incredibly long, complicated words.
Right.
But I think LeVar Burton's a good choice for host. The event's going to be on new TV networks next year. And I think giving them a kind of boost of star power with LeVar Burton can only help. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's fantastic. And, it's interesting because LeVar has said in the past that Reading Rainbow got canceled when funding for children's television, like I guess from the Department of Education or whatever, shifted away from like just love of reading to more like mechanics of language, like so things like spelling and grammar and stuff like that. And you had like Between the Lions and those kinds of things, like not enjoying, his was about like enjoying reading, but they were wanting more stories, more shows about how to read. So it's just kind of interesting that he's now associated with spelling. Yeah. Because that was, anyway, I don't know. It's interesting to me, but I think
did you ever take part in a spelling bee, Kevin?
Oh yes. Yeah. We had spelling bees at my school. A lot. It seems like I don't know. We had spelling tests a lot, and I don't know. I like spelling. I enjoyed. It was one of those things I just kind of, I don't know. I think I enjoyed it. Yeah, I did. I did. I don't know. I love words. So now I'm very fascinated by spelling. I was fascinated
Yeah.
by etymology and why words are spelled the way they are. I think learning that helps me learn how to spell. You know.
Yeah.
But
It
we
absolutely
did in
can.
school spelling bees, and I think I did all right. I don't think I was just stellar, but I think I did all right. What about you?
I took part in one spelling bee, and in the very first round, they told me my word was vain, and I said Vein, and they said incorrect because they were going for vain as in, self-absorbed.
They're supposed
and
to.
and well, I know you have the option to ask for a sentence, or at least in the format we were using, we had the option of asking for a sentence or clarification before attempting, but I vainly forged ahead and got it wrong. So that was my one spelling bee experience. So I'm sure I'll have much more fun watching LeVar Burton host the National Spelling Bee. And I thought maybe we should have a Star Trek spelling bee sometime.
Oh, really?
I think that would
Yeah.
be. I think if we get the stars of the various series together to play for charity and see who can spell the most Star Trek words, because of course there's so many crazy Star Trek words
Right.
that who knows how to spell, and they're even spelled differently at different times in the series and the franchise.
Right.
I think that could be a lot of fun, actually.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Well, and we've had a little bit of a chat also that the best Star Trek spelling words. I'll start with Q.
Yes.
We have Kapla, and Kawat, Malat, and Q, which is of course spelled Kyoo, which no most people don't know that, but that character's anyway. Sorry, that was a bad joke. Let's move on.
So, what Star Trek
yeah.
news do you bring to the table this evening, sir?
I do have a piece of Star Trek news, and it is regarding. I'm going to read this headline as it appears online. Star Trek icons' body parts donated to the Smithsonian.
Oh my!
Oh my! That was the worst George Takei I have ever done. Right there. I just want you to know.
Well,
I can
mine
do
has no
that.
great shakes either. But
Well, I can do it, but that wasn't it. But yeah, Star Trek icons' body parts donated. This is, of course, Gene Roddenberry's fingernails. No, it's not. This is actually, and it took me a second to figure it out. I made a couple of guesses before nailing it. I made 3 guesses all at once, and I don't remember what the other ones were just right now. But oh yeah, I was thinking about prop pieces of data,
oh yeah,
and
yeah.
then the other one was, what was the other one?
Because it does say icon, not actor. So.
Right. Oh, and the other one was like Balok's head.
Oh yes.
But then I was
yes.
like, it's body parts plural, and I was like, oh, I know what it is, and I was right. It's Spock's ears.
It's the ears. Yeah.
Now this is really interesting because the ears are being donated to the Smithsonian National in D.C. And they were donated by Leonard Nimoy's family members.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a set that was supposedly used during the original Star Trek run from 66 to 69.
Okay. Okay.
Now, according to Adam Nimoy, Leonard brought the pair of ears home as a memento to commemorate the 3 years of hard work on the original series. So, and they've been in a handmade black box for over 50 years at the
Wow.
Nimoy home.
Well,
And
that sounds like pretty impeccable provenance.
it does. And I mean, I would, because people who have followed us since the Undiscovered Country Project days might remember a festivity we had every October called Spocktober,
Yes.
which later we did a Spocktoberfest. You were a part of Spocktoberfest one year.
That was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun, and that birthed the book Spockology, because we used to have a lot of guest blog posts, of which
Yeah.
Mike, you wrote 2 or 3.
I think I
And,
did too. Yeah.
Yeah. And we would have a contest for the first 2 or 3 years, I think. We had a
Yeah.
contest every year. A guy by the name of Steve Neal, who is a visual effects and makeup artist, who sculpted Spock's ears for the motion picture. And he did this under the direction of Fred B. Phillips, who was the original makeup artist for the original series. And Fred gave him a pair of original ears and said, "Here, copy these." And he made the molds.
Yeah.
He still has the molds. He makes ears off those molds, sells them on his website. And I asked if he'd be interested in donating a pair for us one year. And he ended up donating, I think overall 4 or 5 pairs over the 2-3 years that he did it for us. And a couple people out there, a few, 4 or 5 people won them.
I was one of those who won them one year.
Oh, you did? I forgot that.
I have a pair of those ears.
Oh man, I envy the heck out of you. Because they're more expensive now.
Oh, well.
Than they used to be. Oh man, but that's
I'll let you know when I put them on eBay. No,
yeah, please.
I'm not going to be putting them on eBay.
No, of course not. But so it was really cool. But he had said that he did not expect that any of the foam ears would have survived, both because they tend to be ripped off and thrown away, and also because the foam rubber would have broken down. Well, it wasn't foam rubber. I don't know what kind of exactly it was. I guess it was foam rubber. But it would have broken down over time. So I imagine these don't look pristine.
Right.
And I'm amazed that they're intact. Apparently there have been some sold over the years purporting to be original, but these are I think the only ones who have that kind of provenance.
Yeah, that is, as I said, that's pretty impeccable, untouchable provenance there.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
maybe if it was like they wrapped shooting on Turnabout Intruder, and Nimoy thought, well, this is the last time I'm ever going to wear these kind of ears.
Yep.
He might have taken them off with extra care that day or something.
Yep, I think that's what happened.
The pair of Spock ears I won through your contest is actually the second pair of Spock ears I've owned in my life. I mean, the other one wasn't anything like as authentic as these, but when I first became a Star Trek fan, my mother wanted to get me some Spock ears, and so she did. But the only pair of Spock ears she could find at the costume store or wherever were for African American skin tone. And I think that's great because it was, decades before Voyager and Tuvok.
Wow. Yeah.
But they don't match my skin tone so well. But still, I enjoyed them. I mean, they were still Spock ears. It didn't matter.
Right. And we did have Black Vulcans in Star Trek 3, I think, didn't we?
We did?
We have one?
Well,
I think we
probably
had
because
one or
there's
two.
lots of Vulcans there on the...
Yeah.
You mean among the ceremonial?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. I think there's one or two.
I think you're probably right. Yeah.
Yep. So it's not far off, but that's pretty cool that you found those.
It was really
awesome.
cool of my mother wanting to do that, I thought, because, her son's into this geeky thing, and this was before being a geek was cool. This was 1984 or thereabouts. Mm-hmm. So it was nice of her to want to do that for me, yes.
That's awesome.
It was a Valentine's Day gift.
Oh, sweet. That's so cool. Oh, man. So I guess, is that the news? That's all the news we can use?
All the news that's fit to podcast.
All right, good. Well, let us move onward then to this latest episode of Star Trek Discovery, Season 4, Episode 5, The Examples. Tell me what you thought of this thing, sir.
I thought that I was very impressed with the main plot line of the episode. I thought it was really classic Star Trek morality tale.
Yes.
And, Star Trek has never been afraid to wade into moral shades of gray.
Right.
Which is one reason I thought this episode's main plot was so impressive and felt really kind of different and refreshing, because the character of Felix, who's one of these 6 prisoners on the planet, or the asteroid, I guess I should say. At first we think all 6 of them have been imprisoned for petty crimes. And
Right.
Felix has let the other 5 think he's in that same boat as they are. And we hear what they're in prison for, and I honestly forget what it is now, but it is pretty petty stuff. They're there to be a deterrent and made an example of by the society, and But Felix killed a man, and he's unwilling to leave the prison facility with Burnham and Book because he really believes he is to be there and that it's a just sentence because he killed a man. He tells Burnham, "It's my life, my debt to pay." He sees this as his penance, and it's very unambiguous for him. And Burnham tries some very Star Trekian arguments about, well, why this doesn't apply right now, and pleading with him that you're giving up your only chance to live, and but he points out, well, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. You think the anomaly is going to hit this place, but it may not. And but at the end of the day, he's very clear on what's right and what's wrong for him in this situation,
Yeah.
and he sticks with it. And I really admire that. And I think the actor who played Felix, Michael Grey Eyes, is just a very compelling screen presence.
Yes.
And I've never seen him in anything before, but I would watch him in other things. I was really impressed with the gravitas he brought to this role, because it could have been very flat and very preachy, but it wasn't. It was just very authentic and sincere and compelling.
Yes, I thought his performance was just the standout element of the episode. I mean, he was just one of the most compelling, guest stars, I've seen on the series, and just what a great story, and what a great moment, and to have Michael and Book on opposite ends of this.
Yeah, that was a nice decision the scripters made. Yeah.
Yes, I like that very much, because we watch Star Trek, and there are these moral dilemmas, and then there's a resolution that's given at the end of the episode. They have to resolve it. They have to come down on one side or another, basically. Sometimes they find a way to hedge it, but most of the times it's like, this is the call we're going to make. But I promise you, there were almost always, or very frequently, people within the Star Trek writers' room who would have written it differently. And I know particularly on Next Generation, there were vociferous discussions.
Yeah, I've read about some of those.
Yeah, about these things, and things could get really contentious. And I love that we've always had writers who care that much. And so it's great to see characters disagreeing with each other within the episode, and not especially resolving that either. Just kind of, it happens, and Book's not happy about it.
Yeah, and you can see why. I mean, even though I agree with Burnham's decision to respect Felix's choice, because it seemed clear to me that's what she should do, I totally get where Book's coming from, because so many people have died from this anomaly already, including his entire homeworld. He wants to do all he can to save life, including this prisoner's life. It was a very well-constructed morality play, as I say. It was very, very nicely and artfully done.
Yeah, it really was, and
believably done.
It's one of these things that Discovery does so well, which is to tell a story that is a classic Star Trek story in really many ways. The kind of Star Trek story that Star Trek has always told really well. And to tell it in a new and nuanced, I mean, it's not exactly a story we've seen before, but this kind of question of sort of a right to die and a right to live, and respecting people's choices for what they're going to do with their own lives.
Yeah.
That's a really, that's a difficult thing to work with. And especially I think it's great that Michael is the one who acquiesces. And I think that shows something of her progress as a character, because when we meet her, she's such a hardliner that she's willing to mutiny against her captain,
right,
to do what she thinks is right. And she still has that strong drive in her and those strong viewpoints, but she's a better listener now, and she tempers herself better. She learns more quickly. And I'm not saying she made the wrong call in the Vulcan Hello. I don't know if she made the wrong call or the right call. I'd have to go back and revisit it, because it's been a long time since I've seen that episode.
My memory of it is I thought she made the wrong call, and ensuing events seem to vindicate that. But
and she
might.
Who
knows?
Who
knows? It's easy as the audience to second guess the characters.
Absolutely.
But of course, that's part of what entertainment wants us. What good entertainment wants us to do is to second guess the characters.
Well, what good storytelling wants us to do. I'll say
right.
Sure. And so I think that does show. I think that does show her aptitude, for the captain's chair, and her growth as a person, and of course we learn something about Book there too. And I think it fits, with his character that he would not want to let this happen.
Yeah.
And,
Oh yeah.
And I love it. And I do also agree with Captain Burnham. I think she did the right thing, and I think it was the best resolution to the story, because if you can't respect somebody's life and force them to live it. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to, if you really value someone, you have to respect their agency. And I've dealt with this in different, not nearly as high stakes contexts, but in other contexts in my life, I've dealt with this where it's like, what's best for them might not be what I would choose. It's not always a black or white decision. And I think, Paul speaks to this a lot in his letters, because I kind of see, at least I see, a theme in Pauline thought, which is the conscience. And, he says, something may be permissible for me, but it might not be permissible for somebody else.
Right.
And I need to be careful in my behavior around them that I don't tempt them into doing something that might be perfectly fine for me to do.
Yeah.
But it's not fine for them to do. Not because God has a rule against it, but because it violates their conscience. And that is causing them to sin against themselves. And I think it's absolutely right that Burnham did not cause Felix to sin against himself.
Yeah. That's an excellent point.
I really like that, because I think that's an element of Christian morality and Christian ethics. And I mean, some people can take or leave Paul, and I understand that. But I happen to agree with him here.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth noting. I really do think it's an element of good Christian ethics, and just good ethics. There shouldn't be a separation between the two, and there isn't, I don't think. But that we do respect people's consciences. I was talking with somebody just today about one of my favorite films, and they were like, well, I can't watch XYZ because of this feeling that I have, and this belief that I have, and this thing, because of how it affects me. And I watch it, and it affects me completely differently. And this is a lot like we were talking about with Reed Lackey in our Spooky Trick episode. And being respectful of that and saying, well, yeah, I think it's great that you're guarding your heart and guarding your conscience and not subjecting yourself to something just because somebody else says it's okay. If it's not okay for you, don't do it.
Do you think there are ever situations where Christian ethics would entail, for lack of a better word, disregarding someone's conscience because it serves a communal good or a higher good than the individual, though?
Possibly. I mean, certainly somebody could have an idea about what should be done, that's going to affect a lot of people that,
right.
That will not lead to the common good. And it's not just that anybody's ideas in their heads about what's right and wrong is always right or wrong, but just because they believe it. But when it comes to how a person conducts their personal life and the decisions they make for the direction of their own lives, I think, there's a lot of agency that needs to be respected there. And of course, that needs to fall within, I think we have some very broad stroke parameters about loving our neighbors. And if people think they ought to do things that aren't loving toward their neighbors,
right?
We need to have a conversation about that.
Yeah. I was just wondering where the discernment comes in there, but I think that's a pretty good starting point. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. This sums up the law and the prophets. So on those two principles, that's a great way to start whenever you're trying to figure out what to do. And like you said, I think the common good is also an essential Christian principle, and one we often lose, just the same way we lose that sense of conscience, because especially in Western Christian religion of the past, 100 years or 200 years or so, probably, or at least especially the last 50, I don't know. People in Christian culture kind of want and expect there to be a list of rules. And good
Yeah.
behavior is about ticking off the right boxes, and sin is about ticking off the wrong boxes. And you want to have good behavior, so you tick off all the right boxes. But, it's not that clean, and it's not that easy. And I think the Scripture speaks to that in multiple places. And I think we do ourselves and our community a disservice when we try to lock down some of the rules where maybe there aren't quite so many rules as we think there are.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just,
Yeah.
but yeah, this is one of those, but anyway, that's why I love this episode. One of the reasons I love this episode.
Yeah. I have to confess, when you said, I think Paul speaks to this, I first thought about Stamets. It took me a second. It took me a second to realize, he means St. Paul.
Sorry about that.
But speaking of Stamets,
The Apostle Paul Stamets?
Well, he's had quite a journey on Discovery already. Who knows?
Who knows?
Where he might end up. But what did you think about the subplot involving Stamets and Ruan Tarka?
I enjoyed that very much. I really liked that Tarka came in challenging Paul and seeming to kind of disrespect Paul. And Paul had done this thing that so many of us are guilty of. Perceive someone's actions, interpret them, assume the intentions behind them, and then judge that person.
Yeah.
He had gone through that whole thing and was so angry at Tarka, even though Tarka had never done anything to him. And yeah, it could be said that maybe Tarka lacks some professional courtesy. But then what I loved was that Paul met him, and it was abrasive at first and was not good at first. But the minute Paul looked at his work, he was like, oh. And Anthony Rapp talked about this on the Ready Room, that he had been really distrustful of Michael at first. He had been really distrustful of Tilly at first. He had really, because he's used to being the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
And he's used to stuff being easy for him. And it drives him crazy when stuff is hard for him. And it also drives him crazy when people kind of move into his space as being sort of the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
And not because he's arrogant, well, although he can be a bit arrogant.
A little bit.
But mostly because he's just comfortable, kind of in that gives him his self-confidence, basically.
Yeah.
But he said the interesting thing was that once he saw their work, it wasn't Michael he was talking about, it was Adira. It was Adira that he was suspicious of at first.
Okay.
And Tilly that he was, sorry about that, Adira and Tilly. And he said once he saw their work, then they earned his respect. And then he would fight for them against anything and defend them against anything. And you see that happen with Tarka. As soon as he looks at Tarka's work, he's like, oh, this could work. This is great. And then he and Tarka are buddies. But it was really interesting how Tarka, it's a little tenuous, because it's cool that Paul was so quick to sort of forgive Tarka for these invented sins that were only in Paul's head. But you could also see how Tarka was really able to sort of nudge Paul and use that eagerness and that dedication that Paul has to getting the answer. We talked about that a couple episodes ago with his attitude toward the Vulcans and kind of saying a dumb thing because he was impatient to get to the solution.
Right.
He used that, and I think he was on the verge of kind of manipulating Paul, and that Paul could really be pushed by Tarka in that way. And Tarka, I think, is not above being manipulative by any stretch. In fact, I think that's kind of one of his tricks.
Yeah.
And so I'm a little concerned that relationship is in a good space, but a potentially dangerous one. If Saru hadn't been there to hit the off switch, I don't know if either Paul or Tarka would have hit it in time. And that's one place I really respect Saru too for his behavior in this scene.
Yeah, that's interesting. I kind of get the impression Tarka knew when the moment to say stop would be, and that Paul didn't, because we've seen Stamets already in this season just give me a little more time. I just need a little more data, right? That was
Right. Yep.
And so I think this was a similar situation. I think we were
Yes.
supposed to notice that parallel, and I think he's too close to it in a way that Tarka's not. And I don't think Tarka would have let the ship get destroyed. I enjoyed the acting of the Saru bit, but I thought Sean Doyle did a great job playing Tarka.
Yes.
I don't view Tarka as charitably as you seem to. Is what I'm hearing. Doesn't he have a line something to the effect of, "You may not like me very much, but I love me"?
Yes.
I mean, I think that crosses from self-confidence into arrogance. I think that's fair to say. But I also think Sean Doyle plays him very engagingly. He's like, he's kind of like a better Kosinski, but still a Kosinski, or a better Paul Stubbs, but still a Paul Stubbs from TNG. These characters who are pretty full of themselves, and in one case, in Stubbs' case, rightfully so, and in Kaczynski's case, not so much. But I don't know. I did like how the characters interacted. I thought both actors did a fantastic job. I didn't have much use for the subplot as a subplot. I felt like it indulged all of Trek's worst tendency towards technobabble. I thought Tig Notaro was criminally underused. I've been waiting to see her all season, and Reno was just kind of a nothing presence, I thought, in this. And it didn't really advance the plot all that much. I mean, we established in the first few minutes the DMA is artificial, and I guess it had a feel of, I don't know, the way they talked about the DMA in the lab kind of made me think of V'ger. There's an object at the center, and we got to find out about it. But I felt like for all the, again, well-acted drama around the science experiment, it didn't pay off much to me in terms of plot movement. Now, I'm not always. I admit I'm not always one to pick up all the nuances of how plots have moved forward. I have to see things a few times sometimes before I think, oh, now I see. But I felt like it was well done filler, but kind of like filler. I don't know. Well, except for the fact that at the end of the episode, what's Tarka? Except for the fact that at the end of the episode, Tarka and Book get to have a moment about anger.
Yeah.
And we see what I think on the back of Tarka's neck is a scar from an emerald chain implant. Is that, am I right on that?
That's what I think that was, yes.
Okay, I thought so. I saw questions online, but I thought, oh, that's the emerald chain doohickey, where that was. So he says how he tells Book anger can be a very productive emotion, and I think that subplot is going to continue because Book's still trying to figure out where and how and whether to channel his anger over what happened to Quajon. So I liked the connection between those two characters too, even though it wasn't the main connection Tarka has in this episode. He's mostly with Stamets, but I thought at the very end to introduce that dynamic, that interested me a lot more than the teching the tech that they did for most of the episode.
Well, see, I would agree with you to a point that maybe it doesn't advance the DMA plot itself quite as much as it could, or maybe as anything could. But I think the amount of advancement we got in the DMA plot is fine. It kind of irritates me sometimes when stuff gets solved too quickly, like when we had the mysterious music in season 3.
Yeah.
And we solved it in 2 minutes in an episode, and then it really didn't go much of anywhere. Yeah. That was frustrating for me because I felt like it was a big setup and quick solution, and
I agree with
not
that.
so much. So I appreciate it when the big problem takes a long time to solve, and literally takes a long time to solve. I didn't think it was unrealistic that they would need to go through all this to collect the data they needed to collect and all that. And sitting there with them through it helped us see all these character dynamics that we're talking about. And I think all those character dynamics, how Tarka affects Paul, how Tarka affects Saru, how Saru affects Paul, how Paul reacts, all that stuff, I think is really helpful. I would tend to agree with you. So in that sense, like, if we say that the goal of the scene is to advance the plot, then maybe it didn't advance it as much as we might have maybe could have, given the amount of time. But I don't feel like the goal of the scene was merely to advance the plot. I think it accomplishes character stuff. So
I agree, and it does it well. And as I said, it was well acted. But I've seen Star Trek do both equally well at the same time. Like I'm even thinking of the first example that came to my mind is that scene in Star Trek 2009 where McCoy's smuggling Kirk on board the Enterprise.
Yes,
and it's a comedy scene, but they're delivering important exposition all the way through, and they do it both. So I know the franchise can do both at the same time. Yeah. So, but I don't detract from anything you said about the character dynamics. I think you explained those spot on. And another character moment I liked in this episode was seeing Dr. Culber ask for help. He's been encouraging his shipmates to ask for help, and now he's asking help from David Cronenberg of all people.
Yes.
But I loved that scene. I mean, that was just I loved it. I loved that scene.
Yes. And Kovich is exactly the right person to help Hugh because he has a totally different style from Hugh. He works in a totally different way. And so Hugh can't play that game. He is thrown off. When Kovich comes into him, that directively, like, we have 8 minutes left.
Right.
Like, that just knocks Hugh's legs out from under him in terms of any defense system he has. And that's exactly what he needs.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
I loved that. I'm just adoring Kovich this season. I think he's a
fascinating character.
Oh,
yeah.
He's great. He's great. Any dude who wears glasses in Star Trek is okay by me.
Right. Okay by me.
That's pretty great. Him and the president of the UFP in Star Trek 6.
That's right.
Yeah. I love this scene because we learned a lot about Hugh. Mm-hmm. And also, I think Kovich in this episode and in last week's episode is showing his emotional perception, his emotional intelligence. Even though he seems like a fairly unemotional character, he perceives people and he can speak to those parts of them and to those things that make them tick, that make them work.
He's not all touchy-feely about it. And no warm fuzzies with him. But he did, like you. I liked the way you put it. He knows what people need in the moment that they need it. So.
Yes, and that's great. And I thought that was brilliant. And I think it's something that I was glad to see because we had addressed that with Hugh to an extent, but not much more deeply. And it's great to see that resonant effects still exist, and I really like that. I really like that a lot. And to see him and that conversation between him and Paul too, in this episode, toward the end of the episode, when they're saying, when I think it's Paul says, we both have the same same neurosis or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, yeah, exactly. They do. And I'd never seen that before, but it's absolutely true. And it's great in this series that there's no character who is flawless. There's no character who is without their struggles and without their wrinkles and without their blind spots. I really like that. It just shows what well-rounded character writing this series has. I love it. You can tell that I am like really character focused.
Well, because I think that's always been Star Trek's strength.
Yeah.
I mean, you've said this before, and I can remember conversations with my friends in middle school when I was first getting into Star Trek that it is all about the characters. I mean, the sci-fi trappings are cool. And they're more than trappings. I don't mean to play them down that much. It's a science fiction series for sure. But if it were just warp engines and phasers, that wouldn't be as interesting. Right. If they were interchangeable characters, So.
Yeah, it's not why we're here. We're here for larger things.
You say that about Discovery doing that well. I really, I don't like all the series in the franchise equally, but I think I can't think of any that leans on having perfect characters, even Captain Kirk in the original series, he's maybe the closest we come, but he has his moments of self-doubt and his moments of being too hot-headed for his own good and moments of making the wrong choice. And I think just Star Trek is good drama first and foremost, and good drama involves realistic, well-rounded characters, and that includes warts and all.
Yeah, yeah. Feel like I see it more in this series, though, because we're talking about something that happened to Hugh in the first season.
Yeah.
And it's season 4, and we're still dealing with resonant effects. And we do that some in Star Trek, but, not nearly as much. We talked about, of course, Picard in First Contact. That's probably the best, progenitor for this kind of thing to exist in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Kirk, too, over the course of the movies, because we can
for
have
sure.
some arc, and so it's there, but it's just within a Star Trek series, this kind of deep character development has been done, but I think it's being done to a new level. I think.
I think you're right, and I think that also just reflects where we are with television as a medium now.
Agreed.
Even Deep Space Nine probably had the most complex characters before Discovery.
Absolutely.
But even those characters feel easier to get a handle on. I don't mean that in a bad way. Just they're a little easier to get a handle on than the Discovery characters. And so I, the fact that a Star Trek series would start with, as you mentioned, the main character committing mutiny in the first episode,
right?
Knowing that she's going to be our main character for however long this thing runs, that's a pretty bold choice, because that's asking a lot of the audience to invest in paying attention to the character and the nuances of the character. And I think they're doing that all across the board, because I think television audiences, we are more sophisticated than we were in the 90s or certainly in the 60s. And so the medium has to acknowledge that to keep our interest.
Perhaps so. Yep. Well, and I will just agree with you as an upshot that Jet Reno was underused, but it was great to see her.
It was great to see her. So I'm trusting we'll see her again.
I'm
and she'll
sure
get more to
we
do
will.
next time.
I'm sure we will. I agree. Awesome. Well, it is that most wonderful time of the year.
Oh, so I hear.
It doesn't
Depends
always
on your
feel
experience,
wonderful.
but it sure is Christmas, isn't it?
It is Christmas. So I think it is time we trek these halls and talk about Oh Christmas Trek.
Oh, Christmas Trek.
Oh Christmas Trek. Oh Christmas Trek. Oh, what the heck? It's Christmas Trek. Oh Christmas
I
Trek.
think that's going to catch on.
Oh Christmas Trek. I've got a facode Christmas Trek. Oh, Christmas.
Have you been drinking eggnog before the podcast, Kevin?
Wait just a sec. It's Christmas Trek. Oh, no, I haven't. But who needs it?
Yeah. Who needs it when you've got Star Trek? Who needs eggnog, right?
Right.
We need some Romulan eggnog is what we need.
Romulan eggnog.
Only for medicinal purposes.
Only for medicinal purposes. That's right.
Oh, no. But I think we were, I mentioned this to David last week, and maybe you've seen it too. I've seen buzzings on Trek Twitter as to whether or not Star Trek Generations is our franchise's contribution to the Christmas movie genre.
Now, what is it because of the Christmas scenes in the Nexus? With
Picard? It's
Picard?
because when Picard goes into the Nexus, his ideal existence is set at Christmas, and so people are saying, "Oh, this makes Star Trek." Some people are saying this makes Generations a Christmas movie, and apparently other people are saying no. And it got me wondering. Well, I mean, that is a part of the movie set at Christmas, but if your only criteria for a movie is that it's set at Christmas, every year, it seems more and more the memes about Die Hard being a Christmas movie go around the internet because it's set at Christmas. And people have done some funny and amusing things with that. But it got me wondering, well, what is a Christmas movie? And does Star Trek have movies, or episodes for that matter, that would fit? Because Star Trek, I looked it up on Memory Alpha, and Star Trek mentions Christmas explicitly very little. And certainly the biggest mention is that scene in the Nexus and Generations.
Right.
So Star Trek doesn't have too much to say on the subject of Christmas directly. But I thought, well, what what kind of things do we look for in our Christmas movies, our Christmas programming, our holiday specials, whatever, that make it that make it so.
Right, right. Well, it's interesting because, yeah, that is kind of the biggest Christmas moment in Star Trek. But it's hard to say that makes it a Christmas movie, because even though I think you could probably relate the themes of Generations to Christmas somehow, maybe I'll do that on a future Advent series. I don't know. I don't know. Does Generations feel like Christmas? Not really. And I will say, as far as Die Hard being a Christmas movie, yes, it is.
I've never seen it, to be honest.
Okay.
I'll come clean.
Well,
I've never seen it, so
Die
I'll take
Hard,
your word for it.
Die Hard and Die Hard 2 both take place at Christmas.
Okay.
And my wife, I had never seen them, but my wife loved them because they're romantic at the end, and that's the way she is. If it doesn't have romance in it, she doesn't want to watch it, but she also likes Die Hard, so figure that out. But so we kind of, before we had our son, we kind of had a tradition of wrapping Christmas gifts every year while watching Die Hard and Die Hard 2. And so, okay, Christmas movie there, I in its own way, in its own very weird way. It kind of.
I'm not going to pass judgment on your Christmas traditions.
It is what it is.
The thing about the Christmas sequence in the Nexus is it's all an illusion, right? And so, I think on the one hand, a lot about the way we celebrate Christmas here in the United States is about fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, on the other hand, the feelings we associate with Christmas are very real if we're fortunate and are having a positive Christmas experience. And I do want to acknowledge up front, not everybody enjoys Christmas, and sometimes for some very valid reasons. So,
right.
But the expected or stereotypical or whatever word you want to use, the aspirational Christmas involves feelings of warmth and love and being with friends and feeling included and feeling safe and just in the cultural celebrations of Christmas. We can get to the religious things too, of course, on the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. But and all all Picard's feeling all those things, the warmth and family and love in the Nexus, but it's all an illusion, right? I mean,
right.
I watched the movie again today, straight through for the first time, and I don't know how long. I've seen bits and pieces of it through the years, and of course, I saw it when it first came out around Christmas time. It was released late November, I think, in '94. But it's never quite explained how or why the Nexus works. It's a convenient plot device to get him and Kirk together in the end. But clearly, that scene, especially that scene with Picard, and then with Kirk with his illusory reality, it all reminded me. So they both reminded me so much of The Cage. That there was the temptation to fall into this setting that's too comfortable, too easy. And then Kirk saying I should be scared of that jump I make with the horse, and I'm not, and realizing none of it's real. It's that theme at that point. What was it? 35 years later, however long, is still so prominent in Trek. And in terms of the rest of the movie of Generations, I really wanted to find some arguments for why it was a Christmas movie, because I've been telling people on Twitter, "Oh, sure it is, because it's set in the Nexus," But then once you start down to think about something, you realize, I thought, well, maybe the theme of family, because there is stuff about family in Generations, but it's mostly about Picard's family members dying in a horrible fire, and there's I don't think there's even really much of the family feel among the crew of the Enterprise that we got all through The Next Generation. And granted, that could just be because it's a 2-hour movie and you got to focus on your main stars,
right?
Patrick Stewart and Brent Spiner. And Generations, of course, is trying to pack so much in to begin with. The task it set itself of passing the torch between the two series, but I don't really pick up on that family feel much among the crew in Generations, and the main theme of the movie is accepting mortality and accepting that time goes on, and that's what makes it valuable. We talked about that in a previous episode not long ago. So yeah, I finished watching it and thought, well, aside from the fact that much of the action revolves around a star in the sky, broadly defined, which is really Epiphany, not even Christmas, if you're going to be liturgically correct about it. Maybe it's an Epiphany movie. You have an epiphany about the value of life, etc. But I couldn't really call it a Christmas movie in the sense that you would put it on and sit back with a piece of fruitcake or whatever and enjoy it.
I think you're right. I think it kind of fails the test because, and not that we have defined the test, but that's because we don't know what the test is. But I do think it's kind of one of those
nebulous.
Things. Like, it is. It's or nexusless or whatever.
There you go.
It is a little hard to nail down. But either it feels like a Christmas movie or it doesn't, or it feels like Christmas or it doesn't.
Well, let's go ahead.
Well, and I've had thoughts about two movies this season, two Star Trek movies as Christmas movies, and I have one older thought about a Star Trek movie as a Christmas movie. The one that was new, one of the ones that was new for me this year, was the observation you had made about the motion picture, which of course inspired the first episode of my Advent series this year, where I used a clip from Star Trek: The Motion Picture, because you maintain that film is about a birth,
absolutely,
a birth of a new life, and
Yeah.
I had never looked at it that way before. I think that's really interesting.
Well, thank you. I thought it was interesting, too, when it occurred to me. You know what I compared it to, and I thought about this way back when I was blogging for the Sci-Fi Christian. It reminds me a lot of 2001, and of course, the motion picture was influenced by 2001. But when David Bowman emerges at the end of 2001 as the Star Child, that scene reminds me a lot of V'ger ascending to wherever V'ger ascends in this blaze of special effects glory. But it's a birth. Both of those scenes are births to a new plane of existence. And I think, whatever some Christians accept as literal truth, the virgin birth of Jesus, others don't. But I think that story is trying to tell us that Jesus is something coming into this world new and not out of nothing because he's born of the Virgin Mary. But we can put it this way, is that the new life that comes into the world is the first time the world has seen a fully human life. We've talked about this before too, you and I, that Jesus is more human than you or I or anybody else has ever been, and that we will only be by God's grace, on the other side of paradise.
Right.
But I think that story of the virgin birth is important because it's telling us that Jesus' life is a new life because it is a fully human life. It's the way God created humans to be, is sharing in everything as we are, yet without sin, because sin is not proper to humanity.
Well, and there is sort of the Advent feeling, in a certain sense, in a lot of this movie of the expectant hope. There is also there is a bit of the melancholy too of Christmas. I think melancholy is a very important part of the Christmas feeling for me. Because we do. It is about light coming in darkness. And so I think we have to acknowledge the darkness. And that's one of the things I always try to do with the Advent episodes is to kind of live in that valley, live in that in-between space, because that's where we need the hope, and that's where we need the joy to break through. And so I think Star Trek, the motion picture, does that. I also think, see what you think of this. Somebody on Twitter said, and I had never noticed this, that the date on the newspaper in Star Trek 4, when they're looking at the newspapers and the newspaper
About the
dispensers,
nuclear arms stalling.
The date on there is December 18th, 1986.
I saw that this year on Twitter too. I'd never known it. Yeah.
And so they said, so Star Trek 4 counts as a Christmas movie now, right? Right?
No.
But I mean, it's not a bad thing. I do think
You could
about,
do worse.
you could do worse. I think about so much of it. I think about the score. I've had the music from that film playing in my head so much since we did
Yeah.
our Star Trek 4 episode, and
Yeah.
the uplift and the joy, and the
Yeah.
and again, new life and redemption, and it ties back a little bit to a blog post that I did several years ago. It was the year Leonard Nimoy died, which I think was 2016. Was that right? 2015 or 2016?
I thought it was 2015.
I think it was
but I'm
2015. Yeah,
not
2015 is the year before my book came out. And that year was the year Hallmark released a Christmas ornament depicting the death of Spock.
Yes.
You know, as dialogue from the scene. Now, these ornaments were planned 2 years in advance with Leonard's input and approval and all of that. Nobody knew he was going to die that soon, of course. And they consulted with the family and said, do you still want to put this out? Because we can shift gears, you know.
Yeah.
And they didn't. They went ahead. They didn't shift gears. They went ahead and put it out. And people have said, you know, some people had said, oh, you know, that's really, you know, that's not, you know, nothing says Christmas like dying of radiation poisoning or something like that.
Right.
But I made a blog post arguing that, no, this is great, you know, because not only does it honor Leonard, you know, in the year that he died and acknowledge that loss that we all had with him, but it also is the moment when Spock becomes a Christ figure. And, you know, the whole thing about Advent, and this is where I'm going with these two movies, the whole thing about Advent and the coming of Christ is the destiny of Christ, you know, and what Christ accomplishes through his death. And so, you know, Spock becoming a Christ figure in Star Trek 2, I thought, well, that's perfect. You know,
Yeah.
that gives beautiful for me as someone who loves Spock as a Christ figure. I wanted that ornament immediately. You know, because
sure.
I was like, this is great. This is the best Star Trek Christmas ornament since the first one. Made me very happy. And so, but tying that in, when we talk about the expectant hope in Advent, there is an undercurrent that we're thinking of the expectant hope of Christ coming for the first time, but we also are tying that into the expectant hope of Christ coming again.
Yes.
And
Yes.
in my cosmology of Spock as a Christ figure in Star Trek 2, 3, and 4, Star Trek 4 is the second coming. Star Trek 4 is when Christ returns to Earth and sets everything to rights, you know, and puts right the world and repairs what humanity has broken, and brings wholeness and newness of life to everyone and everything. And so I really felt like that was just such a beautiful sort of cosmic Christ moment. So for me, you know, I use Star Treks 2, 3, and 4 at Lent, you know, but I think they can also be used at Christmas.
I think
that
you're
way.
right. I'd never thought about it, but Leonard Rosenman's main title for that movie has
Oh, yeah.
the feel of coming down the stairs on Christmas morning,
Yes.
and the tree and all the presents around it, for sure.
Da,
Yeah, it's very joyous and merry, and yeah, and in fact, David and I mentioned briefly last week. You're defending the Spock Christmas ornament, and I think rightly so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, I think it's a great ornament, and I think that does sort of make an argument for Star Trek's 2 and 4 at least to have some Christmas aspirations.
I think so. You know, we started off this conversation still kind of circling around the idea of what is a Christmas movie, and I was thinking, well, let's look at some specific examples, and one that occurs to me is It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes.
Where Jimmy Stewart's character, George Bailey, is about to end his life because he decides he would have been better off never having been born, and he's failed his family and friends. And, you know, mean old Mr. Potter has told him, you're worth more dead than alive.
Right.
And, but thanks to Clarence, George sees just how much of a difference he has made, because he sees what the world will be like without him and how much poorer it would be for everybody that he cares about and for his community. And so it ends on Christmas morning. He's deciding to live. He's re-embracing life and getting a new lease on life. That made me think of the Star Trek TNG episode Tapestry. It seems to me that
Yes.
that's about the closest It's a Wonderful Life story Star Trek has done. And certainly
Yeah.
Q is no angel trying to earn his wings like Clarence, but he does give Captain Picard a view not of what the world would be like without him, but of what he would be like had he gone the safe path, all the time. Had he not been ambitious the way he is, had he always, played it safe, as I say, because Picard had been, well, he does die at the beginning of the episode, or is very near death when he has this experience with Q, and I think it's even left unresolved in the episode how much of it really was a Q experience and how much was maybe not. But regardless, he'd been thinking maybe he should have made different choices in his life, and he sees that would have led him down a much less fulfilling, less satisfactory path. And we can extrapolate from that, he wouldn't have gone on to do the great things he did as captain of the Enterprise. And so the Federation and the galaxy would be a poorer place if Jean-Luc Picard were not Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
Right.
So I think Tapestry could work as a Christmas episode of Star Trek.
In that, you're going, you're stacking some blocks here, but you're not totally wrong, because It's a Wonderful Life does hinge on the re-examination of one's value and one's destiny. And I think as we transition from one year to the next, we often think about our path. And I think that's a good thing to do at this time of year. We talked a couple episodes ago, about choosing to live and one path beginning and another path, one path ending and another path beginning, and that sort of thing. And a new year, while it's an artificial construct, is still a useful construct. And so that sense of reflecting on our lives and thinking about the impact we have on others and our destiny and relating to It's a Wonderful Life, okay. I'll give you that.
But you don't love it, and that's fine.
I don't love it, but I don't hate it either. I think it's good.
Because that movie was not even released as a Christmas movie. It came out in the summer of 1946, I believe, and did not do well at the box office. And I believe
because it took place at Christmas.
Well, the end of it does.
Yeah.
But it wasn't released at Christmas. It was a summertime movie.
Oh,
it was released in the summer into theaters. Okay. So even though some of the action takes place at Christmas, the first time I ever watched It's a Wonderful Life, I was surprised how much of it doesn't take place at Christmas.
Right.
I mean, it's George Bailey's life story, and it happens to end on a Christmas Eve where he's feeling like he's going to end it all. But but it has been embraced as a Christmas movie, and I think for those reasons you lift up, because again, as we said, just a movie being set at Christmas doesn't necessarily make it a Christmas movie.
Right.
But for sure, that one has become, hey, here's another Christmas movie, Home Alone. I think maybe Starship Mine from TNG could be a good analog for Home Alone as a Christmas episode.
Now you're going.
We just need to see Patrick Stewart clap his hands to his cheeks and go, "Oh!" Macaulay Culkin does, and we'd be set. But I saw Home Alone for the first time because my daughter wanted to watch it with us, and my daughter never suggests watching a movie. So when she does, it's like, okay, let's watch it. And I'd never seen it all these years, and I really, really enjoyed it. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it, not just for the comedic bits, but there's a really lovely subplot about Macaulay Culkin learning not to be afraid of the old man next door and helping him reconnect with his family. And I don't think you get any of that heartwarming stuff in Starship Mine, but there's something about defending the home, and I mentioned earlier the family feel among the TNG crew. Picard is, they're all gone. He's home alone, and he's defending this space, not just because it's Starship Mine, but it's where his family lives, that
Right.
they are a family and that's their space, and bad people are out to do bad things in it, and he's not going to stand for that. So I don't know. Maybe I'm stretching and reaching now, but I think you could watch Home Alone and Starship Mine back to back very profitably.
Well, that is definitely potentially possible. I guess the only thing the episode is missing is a shot of Beverly on the starbase going Jean-Luc. But
Well, we've got them all at that diplomatic reception wishing Picard were there instead of them.
there you go. There you go. There's that. Oh my goodness. Well, it's an interesting topic, and you can look at it from different angles. We're looking at it sometimes in a comical angle, sometimes in a less serious angle, sometimes in a more serious angle. There are all kinds of ways that Christmas movies affect us, and different things that we celebrate at Christmas, and different ways that we celebrate Christmas. Some of them are whimsical, some of them are very serious and reflective. And I think it's great to embrace all of that about the season and about the time of year. And with that in mind, I would like to take a moment before we go to explore a very special Christmas audience question. All right, so the audience question this week is another one of these times where we're going to turn it around and ask a question to our audience. And the question, of course, is the same question we answered here. So if you have any ideas about what might make Star Trek Christmas movies or episodes, or how Star Trek plays into your Christmas. I know for me, as I've been growing up since a teenager, I think of Star Trek a lot at Christmas because I've gotten cool Star Trek gifts at Christmas.
Same here.
Like my VHS set I mentioned recently, and of course the Star Trek Christmas ornaments.
Yes.
And so I don't know about you, but I think Star Trek is kind of a Christmas thing for me in a lot of ways. They remind me of each other in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So if you have any special Star Trek memories for Christmas, if you have any ideas about Star Trek that counts as Christmas Star Trek, we would love to hear them, and we'll talk about them on the show. I guarantee you. If you send us stuff, we'll share it on the show, unless you tell us you don't want us to, and we won't mention your name unless you tell us you want us to also. But we'd love to hear from you on that. And as you contemplate that, I would like to encourage you to contemplate why those things remind you of Christmas, what they remind you of about Christmas. We talk about It's a Wonderful Life, and I think that's such a great Christmas movie because it does speak to that in-between space. It does recognize it. It admits the very lows and the very depths to which we can sink as human beings, and then lifts us up out of that into the highs of having that hope and that joy and that peace and that love that we talk about, or that I've been talking about every week in the Advent series. And if you haven't listened to the Advent series, I do encourage you to go listen to it. Binge listen. It's a devotional series. They max out at like 20 minutes, and it's just me talking and sharing some ideas with you that I hope will help you to embrace this season, because I know it's a hard season sometimes to embrace. And I don't do that just to promote my own thing, but in the hopes that it will be helpful to you. I don't know if anybody's ever recommended binge devotion before, but I'm doing that. But
prayer without ceasing, I think that counts as binge devotion.
Is that binge devotion? So I just want to encourage you to use this whole idea of Star Trek and Christmas and all that as best you can, to ask those questions about why Christmas is important to you and to your family, and how you can love those around you this season. And we just hope that you have continued to enjoy this voyage with us, and we hope that you have a beautiful, beautiful Christmas and a happy New Year and all that.
Hear, hear.
So get back to us with those responses, and we'd love to hear from you. So, Mike, what do we have going on next week?
Well, next week, in addition to hopefully hearing a bunch of responses to our audience question and talking about various other Star Trek issues, we will be talking about Season 4, Episode 6 of Star Trek Discovery, which is titled Stormy Weather.
Stormy weather.
Stormy weather, yes, exactly. I was thinking about on NPR's Marketplace, whenever the stock market goes down, that's what they play when they do the numbers, is stormy weather. So.
That's funny. That's funny. That's great. Well, that sounds great, and I hope you will all join us for that. In the meantime, please like, rate, share, comment, and subscribe wherever you can do that. And also send us your questions, or this week, your response to our question. We are Gospel Trek Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and Gospel According to Star Trek on Facebook. Or you can email us at gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to answer your question on the show.
You can support the show by using the support button on anchor.fm/GATST or by going to our Patreon, patreon.com/gospeltrekpodcast. You can support the show there, help us make good content, and get some cool perks as well.
That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Thank you so much for being with us. And until next time,
I'm Mike Poteet.
and I'm Kevin Senes, wishing you all a happy Christmas. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper. See you next time.